Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Wow, a lot going on. Former Senator Dan Coates, now Director of National Intelligence, along with three of his colleagues, Michael Rogers, oh, geez. I don't have the whole list of the four guys who are testifying right here. But anyhow, they're basically all saying, these guys who are, you know, high-level officials in the Trump administration, shall we say. They're saying, we're not going to tell you what we said to James Comey, and we're not going to tell you what we said to the president, and, you know, maybe in private session, but, oh, gee, the private session is going to be with our staff. And so you've got some very frustrated Democrats, and then you've got some Republicans who are just trying to, you know, get back to talking about Section 702. We want to reauthorize FISA, you know, so we can spy on people and all this kind of stuff. And so it's, you know, everybody was kind of expecting, frankly, I was too, expecting fireworks this morning. But I think it's becoming very clear within the Trump administration, to people in the Trump administration, like perhaps the four men who are testifying before Congress right now, that, thank you, that, here we are. Andrew McCabe is the director of the FBI, Admiral Michael Rogers, the director of the NSA, Rod Rosenstein is the Deputy Attorney General. He's, because Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III has recused himself from the so-called Russia investigation, and Dan Coates, the Director of National Intelligence. So these are the guys who are all basically saying, I'm sorry, we got nothing to say to you. Nope, not gonna go there, not gonna have that conversation, don't even think about it, ain't gonna happen. And so we'll see where this goes. Meanwhile, there's a lot in the news, and that I want to share with you. Also today, we're going to have two different guys. Richard Clark is going to be in the office. Richard Clark, you'll recall, those of you who are listening to this program back in the, you know, after the invasion of Iraq, when Richard Clark left the Bush administration, he was on this program a number of times talking about, you know, how his hair was on fire and all these, you know, they were all warning George W. Bush before 9/11, look out, look out, look out, Osama bin Laden is coming, look out. And George W. Bush was going, yeah, you know, I think I'm going to go to Crawford, Texas for the longest vacation in the history of the presidency. So anyhow, he's got a new book out, and he's going to drop by the studio at the top of the next hour. Victoria Jones is going to be with us, talking about the British election, which is happening tomorrow, which really is kind of beginning tonight, our time. They're 5 hours ahead of us. And Charles Sauer will be with us in our third hour, and he and I are going to debate Karen Handel and John Ossoff's discussion. This is the election in Georgia to replace Tom Price. Their discussion about the minimum wage. So anyhow, that's how our day is going to go. There's a bunch of things that I wanted to talk with you about. ISIS or ISIL or Daesh groups have launched a deadly attack in Iran on the Iranian parliament and in a mausoleum. This from Reuters. Suicide bombers and gunmen attacked the Iranian parliament and the museum of Ayatollah Khomeini in Tehran on Wednesday, killing at least 12 people in a twin assault. And here's where it gets interesting, because remember, you know, Trump just went to this region, just congratulated Saudi Arabia on what they're doing, and then just tweeted out trash talking against Qatar, which is where CENTCOM is based and where our largest air base is, out of which we and our allies fly our operations over Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, other countries in the region. Okay, so anyhow, killing at least 12 people in a twin assault, which Iran's Revolutionary Guards, this would be basically the military part of Iran's government, blamed on regional rival Saudi Arabia. Islamic State claimed responsibility, released a video purporting to show gunmen inside the parliament building. They were the first claimed by the hardline Sunni militant group inside the tightly controlled Shiite Muslim community. So the Sunni-Shia war has now broken out in the open. Not that it really hadn't before. I mean, you know, in a thousand smaller ways, and some fairly large ones actually. When the government of Saddam Hussein fell in Iraq, he was a Sunni. He was ruling a Shia majority country. which has now largely, at least economically, aligned itself with Iraq, or with Iran, excuse me, although we continue to support Iraq. Figure that one out. I mean, this is just like, it's just... Anyway, the attackers dressed as women, these were men, burst through Parliament's main entrance in central Tehran. This is according to the Deputy Interior Minister. One of them detonated a suicide vest in the Parliament. Iranian media said 4 people who had attacked Parliament were dead. The incident was over. At least 12 people were killed by the attackers. The second attacker was shot dead. So this, you know, and this, they're saying the hardliners are very angry and will use every opportunity to grow in strength to isolate Rouhani. Rouhani is the more moderate president of Iran, who was just reelected by 78% of the people. And so, you know, the extent to which this is going on and the extent to which our president, through his bumbling incompetence and lack of knowledge of this region, are making the world a more dangerous and less stable place is breathtaking. It's just breathtaking. Other news, Donald Trump has pitched a solar-powered border wall, so it pays for itself, right? Mexico said we're not going to pay for it. It's going to cost $20 billion. The Republicans are appropriating $20 million. That's enough to put some fence posts in, right? And so Steve Scalise, the Republican from Louisiana, he's the House Majority Whip. He says, one idea Trump is looking at is a wall that would actually function as a solar panel to ultimately pay for itself. So let me get this straight. Solar energy doesn't work, and it's a waste of time. We shouldn't be subsidizing solar. We shouldn't be promoting solar. We should be staying with 17th, 18th, 19th century fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, except when the president wants a wall. Brilliant. Staying with those, you know, ancient fuels, those anachronistic, out-of-date fuels, by the way, according to a new study from Princeton and Rutgers University. This is over at, oh, I've got to turn on my, this is from The Guardian. I've got to turn on my, what do you call it? Headers and footers, thank you. The headline, Rare U.S. Floods to Become the Norm If Emissions Aren't Cut, studies warn. This is out of Rutgers University and Princeton University. And they're looking not at 2100, like most of these studies have up till now, by which point, you know, many of us will be dead, and our kids will be old people. But now they're looking at 2050, which is, what, 33 years from now? If I'm doing my math in my head right? So they're looking at 2050. So people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, they'll probably still be around. And they're saying that the average risk of a 100-year flood, I was not in Portland in '96 for the 100-year flood, and that might have even been a 500-year flood, but it was just this massive flood. But we moved to Portland shortly after that, and you know, the damage was just mind-boggling. So they're saying the risk of a 100-year flood will, by 2050, if we don't change the course of things, will increase 40-fold. That's a 4,000% increase, if I'm doing my math right. San Francisco and Seattle would both get 100-year floods every year. San Diego could expect 10 a year. These are floods that normally happen once every 100 years. Key West would be hit 11 times a year with a flood that typically you'd see once every 100 years. New York City would get a 100-year flood every 20 years. But by 2100, they would be getting a flood like that every month. Shut down the subways, shut down the infrastructure, everything. But the president says, hey, we don't need to do anything about, we don't have no stinking emissions problem. We'll just take it, withdraw. Meanwhile, Trump tweeted out this morning, which, by the way, raises a really interesting question. Trump tweeted out this morning that Christopher Wray is going to be the guy that he's going to put in charge of the FBI. Now, Christopher Wray has, a fairly distinguished career. He was overseeing the criminal division of the AG's office, the Attorney General's office under George W. Bush. He prosecuted Ken Lay. But his most recent gig was defending Chris Christie. Chris Christie and Bridgegate. And I think it's fairly clear to most people that Chris Christie should have been prosecuted for this. But somehow Chris Christie made sure that his underlings all went to jail, but he didn't. And so Christie says to Trump, one could infer, says to Trump, hey, if you don't want to go to jail, but you want your underlings to, here's your guy, Christopher Wray. So that's going to be an interesting one. More news on the U.S. officials scrambling to limit Donald Trump's damage with regard to his Qatar tweets. I want to get into what's going on with the latest privatization attempt. It has to do with right here in Washington, D.C. And Trump has just named this insane, well, we'll get to it after the break. Stick around. A lot going on.